Hey guys, how you going? You're here with Bo, and welcome to another interview. Really exciting one today. We've actually got Simon and Josh from IOST. We're actually here in San Francisco, inside this lush building. These guys are super lucky to be working in this sweet office. So Simon and Josh have given us their time today to talk about IOST, which is a huge blockchain protocol, which, to be honest, I didn't know a whole lot about before Simon actually got in touch, but looking into it, it's quite an exciting project and absolutely huge community behind it as well. So Simon and Josh have joined us today to tell us a little bit about themselves, the project, and where it's going in the future. So Simon, first off, why don't you just give us a little introduction?
Sure, thanks Bo. Really happy to have you here, obviously. I'm the growth lead for IOST, specifically here in the States and North America.
Sweet, Josh?
I'm Josh. I do comms for IOST, so basically messaging, all the community information, everything that goes out to the community kind of has to have the same message and coming through like a Chinese team, a Korean team, you have to pull everything together. So
yeah, awesome. So IOST is obviously coming out of Asia, right? And that's probably why I hadn't heard a lot about it in Australia. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the project, where it kind of started and where it's up to now?
Okay, so basically the co-founders, Jimmy and Ray, as well as later Sa and Terry, came about. They worked on a project called Dora, which was a printing kiosk using like machine learning. And so they were able to put this together within 2 years and gain massive market share adoption in almost every Chinese university in the country. And so they expand the business. But when they wanted to expand outside of China, they ran into a wall. Microtransaction businesses don't really work in any sort of system where you have massive credit card payments. And so, or like for every single transaction, right? And that's different in China than the rest of the world. And so they found Ethereum and they were excited about it. They wanted to build dApps on top of it, but they quickly realized after the DAO attack and then also after what you saw with the CryptoKitties, that scalability was a massive problem. And so starting early last year in 2017, they began pulling together a team of tech people, really National Informatics Olympiad winners out of China. So team of geniuses, Tsinghua, Harvard, MIT, Brown, like people really coming from the cream of the crop and started actually trying to tackle a decentralized network. And so that is kind of rounded up to form, and what we now have is a network that we're trying to launch the public testnet in 2 weeks, and the mainnet should come live at the end of this year.
Interesting. And I guess that probably comes into the next question. It's protocol season at the moment in the crypto space. So we got a couple of very well established protocols out there. Obviously Ethereum leading by a long way. A lot of people do think it'll be destabilized, but you got up to 1,000 applications to be built on it. So it is very strong, but it is having those scaling issues, like you said, with CryptoKitties. But we've also got Neo, we've got Cardano as well. We've got Lisk, which will be launching its SDK very, very shortly. You've got Tron. There's so many protocols out there now. What actually makes IOST unique from the other protocols out there?
Doing a couple different things that are unique. First off, we've really started with a tech-oriented team, and I would argue that our tech holds up against any other project in the space. What you're seeing a lot of the time with many of these projects is they're either forking off of something that already existed or they're adding their slight modifications, but we're building something in Go from the ground up. You can check our GitHub. And so the idea is to really create a blockchain that sees the errors of our predecessors and improves upon them. And so there's something called the late adopter or the late mover advantage. And so we're trying to optimize that. We've seen Ethereum do amazing things. It's a brilliant, brilliant project. Vitalik is like why I got in the space. I think he's amazing. But you have this project that is having inherent flaws, and so you can take all the good things and then try and fix what isn't working. And so that's what IOST is trying to go about doing with POB. If you want to handle that for a second, or
sure. And I think maybe talk about some of these other differences as well, specifically with the late mover advantage. It's a really relevant example right now if you look at EOS, and I consider ourselves a competitor of EOS, and it's really handy to see what's kind of gone wrong for them and what we can improve upon. I think when you look at EOS, it provides a really good example of issues that can arise, and especially for issues we're specifically trying to solve. The main item that we're tackling, I'd say, is this decentralization component, and there's plenty of examples of different platforms that have tried to solve this trade-off between what you have is scalability and security. The more centralized you get, in theory, the quicker and faster you can become, but you have other issues that arise.
Simon, from the community side, and touching on your point with EOS earlier, I think one of the issues that these very public protocols are going to have is as soon as there's a bug, especially in the early days, it's like instantly communicated worldwide.
Right.
So I guess not only managing expectations, but actually being able to handle events like that. I guess from your perspective, how is IOST going to go about both managing those kind of errors if they come about and managing expectations of the community as well, that it is still an early stage project, there is developments, there is still going to be bugs, that's just part of the software process.
So we're actually partnering with Chitin Technology, which is probably the world's leading security testing team. They have like several groundbreaking hacks where they were the first team to get around whatever security protocol had been designed. And so we're working with them in China to stress test everything we put out. Obviously, you're not going to catch everything, so we'll do a bug bounty system. We'll try and build out as much as possible. I think what you're seeing though with EOS is that they've struggled to actually build the infrastructure necessary to support any sort of growth from an initial start. And so you can have some like bugs in the actual code, but also the way that the infrastructure was launched, there wasn't really any sort of leadership. And so that's why you've seen a lot of these pauses and reworks. And because the system's so centralized, what the stat is...
It's simple stat, 10 people. In EOS, for example, 10 people
10
own 50% of all EOS. And then if you ramp that up even further, 90% is owned by, I think, just over 1,500 folks. So this is a real issue as we perceive it. There's trade-offs to it, certainly, but the challenges that arise are pretty harsh.
But so we're trying to launch a complete product. That's crucial, right? You can't... There was a phenomenal tweet that I'm going to completely just steal. But it was someone coming up with the example. You can't just kind of build a bridge and then patch it as like cars fall through holes in the bridge, just like build the cement afterwards.
Yeah.
You have to launch at least somewhat of a completed product. And so one of the complaints we get a lot is that we're not launching immediately like all these other testnets. But I would argue that's actually a benefit. We're going to take our time. We're going to make sure the code is as good as possible before we actually release it to the public. Because once it's out there, as any decentralized network should be, it's going to be public domain. And so that has to be as good as we can get it initially.
Yeah, and I think that's a very similar strategy to other platforms like Lisk, and another application that that's out there that I'm quite fond of is Ethos as well. And they've been really, it's been hard for them to manage community expectations in terms of deliverables, but also communicating like, hey, we need to be super careful. Like, not only is this an open source protocol, but there's a lot of money tied into this as well. So we really need to be careful with what we do. And if that means we take a little bit longer, you know, your best interests are actually at heart to actually the users and the investors, right?
That's exactly right.
So I'm interested to know, and this is pretty technical, I didn't actually look into it myself, I'm hoping you guys can explain it to me. The proof of believability consensus mechanism. This must be new, I've never heard about it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, so POV is an interesting system. Basically, in whatever consensus method you come up with, there's a security scalability trade-off. And so the more decentralized you are, the more secure you are, but the harder it is to gain consensus. And what you see with like proof of work is incredible for maintaining an accurate consensus, but it's very energy inefficient and it takes, you know, a very large network. What you have with proof of stake, I would argue there are problems with it implicitly in a rich get richer type of, you know, problem, right? Anyone who bought in early to the system is going to just, by nature of how it works, slowly accumulate all the wealth. And so what we've done is we've taken a proof of stake model with you know, the iOS token, and we've introduced a sub-token called Servi. And so Servi is reputational. You can only gain it by being a good actor in the system, by, you know, validating transactions, by following, you know, tasks that we were basically asking for. And as you gain it, your chances of winning a block reward go up. And so you have to have a certain amount of staking token, IOST, and a certain amount of Servi, which is your reputation. Once you actually do win a block reward, your reputation tokens are destroyed, and that means that you have to continually be a good actor in the system, and you can't rest on your laurels.
So it's kind of almost like resetting the benchmark continuously to make it fair.
Almost like making it a job where you have to keep working to keep, you know, creating. And I think one of the problems a lot of people have with, you know, the way that traditional institutions are set up, you have all these people sitting on passive income that don't have to work for the rest of their generation's lives, right?
Yeah, well, I think that is an interesting point. Is, you know, having these wallets and these delegated proof of stake protocols that, you know, if you hold X amount, it's proportional to your rewards. And if you did get in early, if you're lucky enough to get in early and you have a massive amount, you're sitting pretty good, especially when the market appreciates and those tokens become worth more and more and more.
That's right. I think when you look at that, it's really, this is an example we use pretty often. Right now, if you think of the centralization under banks, there's a number of large banks, and it's really trading out the 11 or 20 top banks for the 21 validators in EOS, for example. And it's simply just trading this is consolidating under. And with us, our aim is really to keep it decentralized and get those specific outcomes that we're looking to achieve via that. And so our consensus mechanism and our technology is looking to achieve it this way.
And so it's designed really to allow us to scale while also maintaining that decentralized nature. And so I think a lot of those delegated proof of stake systems will have, just by their nature, serious centralization issues. We're just harping on EOS right now. I apologize, but
it's just in the news.
There was do you know the Gini coefficient?
No.
So it's used to measure wealth inequality in nations, and so basically accepted rule when you apply it to a country is anything over 60 shows too much concentration of wealth. If you apply it to the EOS model, it's a 97 out of 100.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And so
wow,
what you see is just these DPO systems, they're not bad implicitly, but where you're seeing them rolled out, I think there's just too heavy centralization.
That's right. I'd also chime in on that just to say that's bad on its face. And then you have real life applications. Obviously, you're in town for work and meeting with a number of folks. There was an event last night where someone mentioned just the mainnet of EOS going down. And this was paused and called for, but a conference call was called by EOS to really stop mainnet for all these people to get together and make decisions on how they wanted it to be performed from there. So there's not a stronger definition of centralization than 21 people being able to stop the entire mainnet to make sure that it's working exactly the way that they want it to.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And I think it shows too the overall immaturity, probably of the technology, but also the way that the organizations and the companies behind some of the cryptos are actually supposed to function. I think that's still being ironed out as well, is like, how should a crypto company be structured? Especially the very decentralized ones, especially the protocols. I reckon that's probably the hardest part. And that comes down to the foundations of things too, right? Because IST has a foundation, is that right?
That's right. That's who we work for, is the iOS Foundation.
Internet Services Foundation. But so basically the idea is that you should be a nonprofit organization that helps launch this program out into the world, and then you step back. And so you have a certain amount of reward, and you also should be, in an ideal world, you should be building all the structures around it as well, so that when it does launch, it doesn't just kind of flop the way that I really feel like we're harping on EOS. I apologize to any EOS fans out there.
That's all right.
But you have to build that infrastructure, right? You can't just create code and then release it into the world and expect it to get adopted. If you look at any sort of technological development, it's a mixture of building the technology itself, but also developing an ecosystem that builds on top of it. That developers are really important. Have you seen? There's a famous clip of Ballmer, I think, who's one of the Microsoft CEOs, just going crazy on a stage, harping developers. It's the only thing that matters. People building on your network.
I'd say there's really one thing to think about as well, to just talk about an element. There's two things. First is, what is blockchain itself really good for? And can some of this stuff just be solved with a spreadsheet? And the answer is yes, some of this stuff should be done on a very fast, efficient, owned, permissioned, centralized database. It's just going to be faster. When you don't have the actual needs of a blockchain, why would you actually have it? And then there's to your question of what to use and when. Even Vitalik recently mentioned, there's a bit of a spectrum. You can be completely decentralized on one end, but then also there are some use cases where you curve this a little bit more towards centralization. And so what you were saying is really, in real life, how does this play out? And some of it, to your point, is to be seen.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's going to be very interesting to see, I think, the next 5 years, especially because it's becoming a much more competitive environment.
Absolutely.
When I got in, it was kind of like companies didn't have to work that hard to be noticed and to gain massive followings, whereas now, just about every idea has been solved 10 times over. Well, has been proposed to be solved, maybe not the implementation of it.
Yeah.
That's right. And I would say maybe oversolved too.
Yeah.
Just throwing everything on the blockchain, and then what more can we do?
That came up quite a bit in the conference, actually, was Some of the real thought leaders were, like, hey, does this really need to be in a blockchain? I think that's part of the challenge of this industry is now to educate other people out there, not in the development world, but in the entrepreneurship side as well. Was how does your idea, how can it work on a blockchain and can a database solve that problem? And I think you're right. A database probably 70% of the time can probably do that job.
That's right.
So IOST looks to be very much based in Asia, as we covered earlier. Certainly from my perception on the team, a lot of the team's Asian as well. But you guys, you're here in the US. And doing a little bit of research this morning, I saw that IOST is now expanding into Europe. What's the big plan? What's the big go-to-market strategy? I mean, what's the huge ambitions of IOST?
Yeah. I think it's a pretty long answer because we have really lofty goals and we're really shooting for the top. We want to be the best that we can be in our blockchain tech. That's why we started from scratch. There's two things to think about when you look at IOST and our global initiatives and what we're trying to achieve. The first is that we want to build infrastructure that's global. If you look at any main companies, if you look at Microsoft's of the world, Google's of the world, they have developers really globally located. So we must, and we're actively looking to achieve a developer base that's truly global. This will help us hit that objective of being decentralized. And the second component would be really a community that's also global. Without a global community, a lot of those other decentralized items will fall flat. And so that's a big component of A, why we're opening a number of offices all over the globe, and then B, looking to support and be there for communities.
I think what you're seeing a lot of is projects that say they're fully tech focused and then stay in one centralized location and are from one culture and have one perspective. And so we're trying to build a truly global organization that's able to create something that can be used by the world and doesn't discriminate towards any one hue of idea of how things should go. And I think that's one of the coolest things about IOST, right? We have offices in Korea, in China, we're getting an office in Japan, we'll be launching an office in India. We've got a Southeast Asia, Singapore office that's starting to spread. I think we launched that 2 weeks ago. We're launching a German office in about a week and a half with a European go-to-market plan. We have offices in the US, in San Francisco and New York, and we're trying to get that type of feel so that what we end up producing, what we end up creating, and the community we build around it is actually a global movement.
Interesting. And I mean, crypto and blockchain is very global as well. It's inherently in its nature.
That's absolutely. We were talking about Vitalik and how he basically lives on a plane. We would say we're aligned in that way, where we really want to spur this global community, much like the most successful projects. Bitcoin, extremely global. Ethereum, extremely global. So this is an objective of ours as well.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's good to hear. I was talking to some guys at the conference last night. Everyone just looks so tired because crypto's is 24/7.
Yeah.
These guys are flying every week, sometimes every few days, just around the world. They just live out of their suitcases.
That's right.
And it's like, you wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, look at you. You didn't pick up your accent in the mission.
Yeah, very true. Very true. No, it's an exciting industry to be a part of. So coming back to, I guess, maybe more of the tech side at the moment. I was going to go straight into any dApps. Are there any dApps built on it? But I'll come to that next. What I'm interested to know is what can developers do now if they want to maybe start getting themselves up to speed with IOST? Is there any work they can do on the protocol now, or is it still a little bit of development yet?
So I'll take this one. There are a couple things. First off, we've launched something called Theseus, which is an internal dApp team. And so that is members of the IOST tech team who will be moving on to just make dApps, but it's also recruiting anyone who's interested, has the skills, has a track record in this type of development. We'd love to have them. But we're also launching our public test in 2 weeks, which is pretty big for us. And so once that's out, people will be able to play with it, figure it out, mess around with it. Right now you can go to the GitHub to see what we've created so far, but a lot more will be released in 2 weeks. And then we have an announcement that we're not quite allowed to share just yet, but in about 4 to 5 days we'll be announcing a sort of fund that will be helpful for blockchain developers going forwards.
That's
That
right.
was too much already. Wow. All right. Maybe we can cut that.
Yeah, I don't think a genius
I'm
would
so
reply.
excited about it.
No, look, it was very ambiguous. It was very generic. I'm sure no one understood what that was.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Oh no. Do you want to talk about the 35%?
Sure, yeah. Your question is, how can people get involved? Obviously, the testnet is critical for that. So that means it'll enable anyone who doesn't have ties to get on there and play around. I think that's really important. But building this global infrastructure, which we said is really important, and getting these developers is so important to us that we've locked up 35% of all the IOST tokens just to be used to support and push and build and grow dApps.
Mhm.
That can't be overlooked. We put it as such a priority that we've set these funds aside to achieve just that.
Mhm.
So I think the best thing to do would be developers who are out there really at any level. They could be college students that want to work on something. They could be on existing projects. They may want to try something new, or they could really believe in our decentralized and global vision. I'd encourage them just to reach out to our team. We have every social channel. We can talk more about that. Or when testnet goes live, just to go in, play around, work on it, and just develop on top of that.
So putting myself, because obviously the development side is very important. So is the commercial aspect, right? So is putting myself in the shoes of an entrepreneur or someone that's thinking of a new idea.
Yeah.
What makes, I guess, let's say I'm looking at all these different protocols.
Yeah.
I've got Neo, IOST, Cardano, Ethereum. What pitch is there for someone in that position looking to build a dApp for them to say, oh, IOST is it, I want to do it, and then what steps can they take to reach out to someone to talk about what the capabilities of this protocol are?
I think really at the end of the day, you're looking at the tech. And so there's a rule for developers, right? Like, will it work? That's about it. Will it work? Will it save me money? I'll use that one. And so I would argue that the tech we're building is a multi-platform. We're going to be able to support several very common languages, including Go, Java. We're also going to have Solidity support, and there are two others that we haven't announced yet, but will be supported. So basically creating this platform that actually allows developers from every stripe to build on top of it. In terms of getting involved, there are multiple avenues to reach out. Unfortunately, because we haven't launched the testnet yet in about 2 weeks, we aren't yet accepting anyone. But in the near future, we'll be announcing several funds and other sort of things that allow on-ramps basically for developers to build on IOST. In regards to other coins, again, it really just comes down to the technology. And so I encourage people to check out our white paper, to read a little bit about what we're actually building, and to look more into us. IOST website.
Definitely. But to expand on that point, though, a lot of entrepreneurs haven't engaged developers yet,
Right.
and they may not have a fundamental understanding of blockchain capabilities and what the differences are between different protocols. Is there somewhere they can go or something that could help them gain an understanding of why they should explore IOST before they've engaged developers, before they've actually gotten very technical people on board to explain it to them without having to go and read a white paper? Because white papers are hard to understand. Some of them are very hard to understand.
Yeah.
I mean, is there something that jumps out at them, somewhere they can go, someone they can talk to say, hey, IOST is the future. We're going to have support. This is what you're going to be able to do with your application, before they have to go and actually get a developer to explain it to them.
Yeah, I think the team is really where you go to find that type of support, right? And so we are building out that message, and we are doing a lot more messaging on the Western side to tell people what actually are the capabilities that we're enabling. I think one of the things you're seeing though is that a lot of projects that are coming out right now don't really need to be decentralized. We kind of mentioned this earlier. And so we're all waiting for that killer dApp to really come about. And so it's an IOST mission to just make it as accessible as possible to any entrepreneur or developer who wants to. We're trying to create the infrastructure able to support it, but also create the infrastructure necessary to support the developers and entrepreneurs by pulling them in, giving them the funding, giving them the runway to really explore their ideas and play around with it.
Right.
And you guys, you're obviously expanding the offices, you're expanding the company. Are you doing any roadshows, any conferences or anything like that, traveling around getting the word out there?
Right now, almost everything is going to be based in Asia. We'll be going to several events in the next 2 or 3 months. I honestly can't name them off the top of my head, but if you want to put links in or something, we can say where we'll be.
Yeah.
We believe that it's really important to speak at some of these conferences, but we're much more focused on A, building the community, and B, building out the tech. And so at least for the next 2 or 3 months, we're very tech focused. We're launching the testnet. We're trying to build those partnerships with other top tier teams and really come out with a united front so that when we are ready for these roadshows, we have something incredible to show.
To me, it's like a little bit different, right?
Okay.
Like
Yes.
a big part of what I have to do is actually a little bit of what you just said.
Sure.
I'm speaking in Philadelphia in August. There's a number of different conferences that we'll be attending. So I think we definitely realize what you've said, which is this is hyper competitive. We definitely want developers on board. That's why I'm encouraging them to reach out to our team. And as we ramp up our exposure, especially in the West, especially in English speaking countries, you will find us out and about, and we're really approachable. I'd say come up to me if you see me out, and others as well.
That's good, and I think that's important just from my own experience too. As you're seeing a transition from a very developer-focused industry, you're now seeing a lot of entrepreneurship, and a lot of the entrepreneurs and their ideas, they may not be developers in their past lives, and so they're going to be seeking out. They're going to take a lot of advice from the developers they engage as to what they should build on, or consultants and things like that. So I think engaging that side of the industry as it transitions is going to be really important, especially in that competitive environment.
Right.
So guys, that's about all I had. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. I think
Thank you for coming.
I think it's been really interesting getting to speak behind really the coalface of the protocol. Is there any closing remarks, anything you want to tell the audience, any developments, any updates? Where can they follow you on social media? Go for it.
Sure. So as we sort of mentioned, there will be a big announcement coming out in about 5 days. So we encourage you to please, somewhere between the 21st and the 24th of June. So please follow us on Twitter, on Reddit. You can find us on Discord, where we're very, very willing to answer any sort of question you have about the project. And we love talking about this stuff. We really care about blockchain development, spreading this type of technology around the world. And so we'd love to answer your questions.
Right. I'd also say our newsletter is a really great resource for information. We're publishing that every week. I'd highly encourage you, if you're a developer or investor interested in the project in any way, to go ahead and subscribe to that, or just go ahead and check it out weekly. You can find it on Medium, on our website, really all the social channels. And don't be afraid to reach out. We're happy to chat with you and look forward to it.
And guys, there'll be links in the description to all the social channels for IOST and to the website as well. So make sure you check that out. Simon, thank you,
thanks,
mate.
Bo.
Appreciate it.
It was a
Josh,
pleasure.
thanks. Cheers, guys.
Second sight.